is a miracle.
Amazing, incredible, and sometimes life-saving events cannot be foreseen. And sometimes miracles happen in the most unlikely of places and under the strangest of circumstances. That's just what happens in this next story. From the time he was born, Ellen and Terry Mockney knew that their son Edward was destined for great things.
From the time he was really little, he was an extraordinary child. He had a really high vocabulary. People would be amazed at the words he could put together for sentences and things.
His natural abilities and a strong desire to succeed pushed Ed toward a college education. In 1995, he had just finished his sophomore year and was starting summer vacation.
I had a lot of friends that he enjoyed to be with. He did the same things that everybody else's children do. Then he had his accident.
It was June 15th, and as Ed got into his car that day, he had no idea that his life was about to take a dramatic change of course.
He was going over to a friend's house to work on her car, and he stopped at the auto body store and picked up parts that he needed.
He was enjoying the freedom of being out of school and taking some time to relax.
He had some expensive stereo equipment in his car, and he turned down to change the channel.
And when he looked up, he had an oncoming car come at him.
Without time to think, Ed swerved to avoid the car and lost control, sliding down the embankment before rolling over and crashing into a tree. His head had hit the steel bar along the window, crushing the vertebrae in his neck and knocking him unconscious. Now, as he lay dying, the first of a series of miracles was about to happen. An off-duty emergency medical technician who happened to be working nearby was the first to arrive on the scene.
We need a paramedic on the corner of 4th.
He quickly determined that the young man had broken his neck. While most people would not have understood the severity of the situation, the EMT realized that supreme caution had to be taken. He supervised Ed's removal from the vehicle. And knowing that even the slightest bump in the road could potentially be fatal, he made the unusual and miraculous decision to have Ed transported to the hospital by a life flight helicopter.
Dispatch, it looks like we're gonna need a life flight.
He said, I don't know why I called life flight, but I do. He was prompted by God. I know he was, because Ed would have died in the ambulance.
Safely at the hospital, X-rays revealed the true extent of Ed's injuries.
The technician saw the X-rays. He said, don't touch him. If you touch him and move him, it'll kill him. So they took us into the room next door. They told us that you have a top vertebrae and then your brainstem goes through that top vertebrae. That he had actually shattered the top and the second vertebrae. There was actually nothing holding his head onto his body.
Well, how do we repair that?
And he looked at me and he said, no, we don't repair those. And he says, well, to be honest with you, he says, he's got about 12 hours to live. We spent the next 12 hours waiting for what the doctor said would be inevitable.
But before the time was up, another miracle occurred.
Terry, Ellen.
A doctor who had recently performed a successful skull reattachment was located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, just 30 miles away.
Before they could move Ed to Ann Arbor to actually do anything for him, they had to install a halo brace.
A halo brace designed to keep the head and neck completely immobile was screwed directly into Ed's skull and strapped tightly around his chest. And for the second time in 30 hours, Ed was once again inside a life flight helicopter heading to a medical center at the University of Michigan. At 3:30 in the morning, Dr. John McGillicuddy arrived to explain the procedure he would be performing.
What we needed to do in order to try to put Ed back together was to find a way to affix his skull base to his cervical spine, and thus protect his spinal cord from any further motion.
During the surgery, a metal rod would be inserted to connect the base of his skull along the curve of the neck.
Dr. McGillicuddy was a very confident man. That was reassuring. He told us he thought he could do it, but there were no guarantees.
There are some risks.
The procedure was risky, and there were some real dangers to doing that, but there wasn't really any choice. Something has to be done.
The delicate operation was scheduled for Sunday, which also happened to be Father's Day.
It was real special because this doctor could have scheduled the operation for any time that he wanted to, But he decided that my son was more important than his own family at this time, so he spent those 10 hours on Father's Day with my son. And I thought that was really, really neat of that man.
Ed was in
With the odds heavily against their son surviving the operation, Terry and Ellen enlisted the help of their family and friends.
We could really use your support in a prayer chain.
People that had been designated to pray that had said, okay, if you call me with a need, I will start petitioning God for that need. And that's what our prayer chain did. And then they not only started praying, they started showing up at the hospital to be support for us right there.
Inside the operating room, the doctor and his team worked exhaustively to reconnect Ed's skull to his spine. 10 hours later, Terry and Ellen learned that their prayers had been answered.
Right, now surgery was fine. The attachment to the skull.
Ed was alive, and the surgery had been a success. But the fact remained that even though he had survived, it was uncertain that Ed would ever be able to walk again.
They had told us if he made it through the operation, with rehabilitation and everything, he probably would not walk out of the hospital on his own. He would be in a wheelchair.
But the possibility of never being able to walk again was something that Ed could not accept.
While he was still in the intensive care unit, he decided he was going to be out for his 21st birthday. He would turn 21 on August 21st, and the doctors told us, no way. There is no way, even if he does well, there's no way he'll be out of this hospital by August 21st.
For the next days and weeks, Ed worked and struggled to gain the strength to get out of his wheelchair.
They stood him up for the first time, and he took 3 small baby steps. You did it. Right then, I knew that we weren't going to have any problems.
On August 21st, his 21st birthday, Ed kept his promise. In a room packed with family and friends, he walked to the microphone and thanked everyone who had prayed for him.
It's kind of amazing to realize that all these people are praying for me, and it's not because they have to. They know that it's the right thing to do, and I appreciate every minute they spent praying for me.
A series of remarkable events turned a near tragedy into a miracle. First, an emergency medical technician arrived on the scene within minutes of the accident. And understanding the severity of the situation, he radioed for a helicopter. Anyone else might have called for an ambulance, and in Ed's condition, the bumpy ride could have killed him. Second, a surgeon who had performed a similar operation just happened to be at a nearby hospital, and he agreed to perform the risky procedure on a day that Terry Mockney will never forget, Father's Day, 1995.
Father's Day that year was really neat. I tell my kids, I said, I didn't get a card, and I didn't get any presents. But what I got, you couldn't buy anywhere, in any gift shop, anywhere in this world. And I got something that money can't buy. The Bible talks about miracles. You talk about people getting up and walking that were crippled, blind eyes seeing, deaf people hearing. This was a miracle. This was so many miracles in one that you couldn't help but believe.
You did it.
If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, yet you're incredibly thankful that it happened, you might consider this. Maybe it was a miracle.